Welcome to this ARC 432 presentation of the Incan Empire observed at three scales. From its military and administrative center in Cusco, the Incan Empire conquered neighbors until its empire dominated the west coast of South America. As this topographical map shows, it is a rugged and mountainous terrain. This expansion lasted from the 1400s into the 1500s. It required the Incans to project military force and administrative control across an enormous empire. As in the case of the sprawling Roman Empire before them, the Incans achieved this with roads. The road system extended thousands of miles, with one road, through Quito through the Mendoza River, extending over 3,500 miles. The Spaniard Pedro Cieza de Leon, who would have personally seen Roman roads in his homeland, had this to say of the Incan roads when he saw them in 1553. Quote, I believe that, since the memory of people, it has not been read of such a greatness as this road, made through deep valleys and high peaks, snow-covered mountains, marshes of water, live rock, and beside furious rivers. In some parts it was flat and paved, on the slopes well made, by the mountains cleared, by the rocks excavated, by the rivers with walls, in the snows with steps and resting places. Everywhere it was clean, swept, clear of debris, full of dwellings, warehouses for valuable goods, temples of the sun, relay stations that were on this road. Unlike the Aztec Empire, where roads were frequently used primarily for travel by elites to maintain relationships between the elite classes of the conquerors and the conquered people, the Inca appear to have used their roads for logistical purposes to supply military campaigns and to transport valuable goods which were moving from the periphery of the empire to the administrative center. Since people living under Inca rule were not answering to their own uh, local elites, but directly to Incan conquerors and their administrators, life under Inca rule involved a direct relationship with Incan authorities, Incan tax collectors, and Incan accountants. Incan conquest extended not only the roads and physical manifestations of Incan infrastructure, but also the administrative controls, tax collection, and cultural contact. When the Inca Empire took control of the area around Monte modern scholars are unaware what language or other barriers may have disrupted prior Incan procedures, but an unusual construction comprising thousands of uniformly sized and regularly arranged pits was created along the spine of the mountain. The purpose of this large, durable structure may not be obvious, but the uniform arrangement of these containers is easier to understand in the context of this grid pattern, which is like one found in an administrative building floor in Inkawasi. The floor in that structure was designed to facilitate tallying tribute. The floor pattern relates to the patterns that were used in an Incan accounting system. The Incans did not keep their tribute records on clay tablets, although they measured them on floors with a grid. They stored the information on quipu. The quipu is the Incan method of storing numbers using knotted and colored lines. Since quipu are not as durable as a fired clay tablet, relatively few specimens still exist. Those that do exist have been studied intensively by scholars to determine what information is encoded in them. Although a quipu may look at first glance like a kind of rope abacus, it involves more information because it can be decoded not only by the position or absence of the knots, but also because the knot direction and coloration of parts of the quipu affect the interpretation of the quipu. Modern accounting depends upon a concept known as double entry accounting. The history of double entry accounting ran into a dead end in Europe when early 15th century records had it suddenly appear in Italy with no apparent source. In his article in Journal of Accounting Research, Lyle Jacobson is able to trace double entry accounting as a concept to quipu records maintained by the Incan Empire for tax collection, credit, and debt accounts. Locals who are subject to Incan rule would not deal only with their own local elites who would be clients of an Incan overlord, but they would interface directly with Incan administrators who would travel to their communities on Incan roads and use Incan measurement tools to keep Incan records on Incan accounting systems to determine whether subjects were meeting their obligations to pay taxes and provide other required support to the Incan rulers. As one scales up from a single family making a single tax payment before a single administrator who adds one unit of record to an Incan quipu and begins to look at villages and whole countries that have been conquered whose tax payments add up and are transported across the Incan Empire to the administrative center of the empire in Cusco, one can see how administrative control, more critically than military power, allowed the Incans to gather and direct resources toward the enormous empire spanning construction projects that outlast the quipu, stretch thousands of miles, connect city after city, trail most of the western coast of South America, and create a legacy of architectural wonder that astounds viewers even today when they see how structures made 5 centuries ago have withstood the elements and time with no maintenance and look as durable now as they did when they were created by a people whose only remaining written records are encoded in string. When considering scale, it is useful not only to compare the size of the Incan Empire to the size of a single quipu, but also to look at time. The durability of a single quipu and the durability of stone architecture of the kind used by the Inca is especially worth considering when looking at the terrain involved. A steep hillside like this can be expected over time to be subject to landslides and to other effects, particularly in light of the precipitation that is received there, which is significantly more than lands, for example, in a city like Chicago. The secret is that underneath Machu Picchu, the entire structure rests upon a series of water management infrastructure elements. By carefully crafting deliberate drainage between levels of the terraces, the Incans were able to ensure that rainfall led to an organized, regular, moderate water flow and prevented oversaturation and landslide. In the time since the rediscovery of Machu Picchu in 1911, work has been done to clear foliage that overgrew the site, but the underlying infrastructure that prevented landslides and ensured careful, deliberate, slow, organized water movement down the hillside to prevent landslides continued operating as it had for centuries. In the centuries between the destruction of the Incan Empire and the rediscovery of Machu Picchu in 1911, no maintenance was performed to keep the water management infrastructure operating. This infrastructure operated maintenance-free, preventing landslides for hundreds of years. The water management supported by the terraces was augmented by a series of fountains that provided a deliberate flow of water through controlled points from higher elevations to lower elevations in places the designers intended and were prepared to handle the flow of water. As a result of the thoughtful and durable water management infrastructure, Machu Picchu remains in very much the same condition structurally as it was hundreds of years ago when it was abandoned following the destruction of the Incan Empire. The durability of sites like Machu Picchu is not down to water management alone, however. It is worth looking at the stonework itself. The unique shapes and the irregularity of the stones turn out to be an asset in a geologically active environment. Uniformly sized bricks made in the European tradition, which are typically stacked in a repeating pattern in multiple courses, can contribute to failures during earthquakes because the walls lose durability when the organization of the stacking pattern is disrupted by vibration. Incan stonework, which involves uniquely shaped pieces that fit exactly against their neighbors in an irregular pattern, only have one stable orientation. When vibration occurs during an earthquake, the stones must come to rest in the only place that they can come to rest, which is a stable position, and the position in which the stone was originally located. As a consequence, enormous retaining walls, such as this one, are able to withstand earthquakes and centuries with no maintenance at all, while performing fully the entire time. This durability does not exist only when the wall is held up on one side by the earth. Although weather and years and plant life may have stripped these structures of their roof systems, the wall elements, which are made from the irregular Incan stone technique, remain as strong as they probably were the day they were made. Using a construction method that withstands earthquakes and which endures without a great deal of maintenance offers an enormous advantage. When minimal resources are put into maintaining structures that have been completed, and few resources are put into rebuilding things that have fallen into disrepair following construction, more resources can be put over time into productive infrastructure such as roads, way stations, administrative centers, and other elements that will support an organization and give value to users instead of causing users increased maintenance and operating costs over time. An artifact like this 12-sided stone that is part of a wall in Cusco helps explain how an empire the size of the Incan Empire can be created and extended in such a modest time. All of the investment that was made by the Incans in structures was available effectively forever and did not need to be rebuilt. When a terrace was built to support farming on a slope, or a fortress was built to protect an administrative center from enemies, this did not materially increase the operating costs to the Incan Empire. Those assets could be employed to support the community, and any benefit derived from them could be put towards future development rather than being consumed primarily in operating costs and rebuilding and maintenance. Enormous, large-scale, durable infrastructure improvements such as this retaining wall and associated fortress stand in contrast to something as ephemeral as a quipu. But without the administrative support offered by the quipu and the relationship between the Incan administrators and locals throughout the empire that was facilitated by their process of directly interfacing with subject peoples, the Incan Empire would not have been able to gather or marshal or transport the resources that were ultimately required to build the durable artifacts that we recognize today as being quintessentially Incan. And we would not see the long retaining walls, we would not see the water management infrastructure, and we would not see the buildings that we recognize as architectural wonders. So as we look at the Incan Empire at multiple scales, we see on the one hand an enormous continent-long empire. We see roads wide enough for one traveling party, and stones that hold up one piece of a wall, or a pit that holds a single tax allocation. But in another dimension of measurement, we have an abstract concept like double entry accounting that is represented by an ephemeral artifact such as a quipu. We have an empire that lasted nearly a century, only a few human lifetimes. And then on the other extreme, we have this wall-lined road in Cusco, which is even today supporting buildings that are currently occupied and are being operated, nearly 500 years after the destruction of the empire that created them. So we have the Incan Empire at 3 different scales in 2 different dimensions.